Gettysburg, site of the fiercest and most famous battles of America's Civil War. Many historians say that it was the pivotal battle of the war, the battle that turned the tide in favor of the Union and changed the outcome of that war. And who were the men who helped determine that outcome? In an army of more than 70,000 soldiers, comprising hundreds of regiments from the northern states, 15 Maine units, infantry regiments, artillery batteries, sharpshooters, and cavalry all contributed to the Union victory. Had any of them failed, the battle could have been lost. July 1st, 1863, the first day of the battle. Thousands of Confederate soldiers began streaming toward the small Pennsylvania town.
On July the 1st, 1863, it becomes a meeting engagement. Neither Robert E. Lee nor George Meade expected a battle on this day. And what transpires is that for the only day of the battle, the Confederates are going to have an advantage in numbers.
The Southerners are invading the North, and when they heard the Union Army was coming, they decided to concentrate their army. When they did, the roads bring you to Gettysburg. That's why the battle is fought here, and those roads really favor the Confederates because they brought 30,000 soldiers here on the first day, and the Union could only muster 20,000.
Lee had come north thinking that if I can somehow threaten Baltimore or Washington and come in from the Northeast, come in from Pennsylvania, I can make it possible to sue for peace. And what Lee had in mind was a bold stroke that could lead to an earlier resolution to the conflict. What they didn't know was that John Buford and a lot of the Union guys had shown up early, wondering where the Confederates were. And all of a sudden, here they are facing each other. Oliver Otis Howard from Leeds, Maine shows up, and he climbs up into the tower of the Lutheran seminary, and he's looking and he's seeing that clearly there are a lot of Confederate troops coming this way. The roads are clogged with them. John Reynolds shows up. He's in command of a lot of the infantry, and they say, okay, we have to set up a defensive posture and we have to do it fast because this is not going to go well. We can't afford to lose here. General Reynolds is trying to position the rest of the defensive posture for the Union forces, again, outnumbered. And he goes out to give orders. But in the battle, he's shot by a Confederate sniper and is literally killed off his saddle. General John Robinson takes command on the ground. Howard is still in the seminary, and they're trying to figure out what the defensive posture is going to be with the guys who are not coming in, and sending orders out to the groups that are on the north and west side of Gettysburg. Get back through the town, get up on the ridge. The only unit sent forward to stop the Confederates is the 16th Maine. Charlie Tilden gets the orders from General John Robinson. Take your men, go out to the Mumsburg Road, and set up a defensive position. Hold out as long as you can.
To slow the Confederate advance and allow the Union Army to gain the high ground above the town, the 16th Maine is ordered to set up a precarious defensive position against impossible odds. Scarcely more than 250 soldiers trying to stop more than 3,000. Yet slow the rebels down they do, but at enormous cost.
The 16th Maine becomes, in effect, a suicide unit. They are sacrificed so that the rest of the Union troops can get to the higher ground.
And the regimental flag has been torn to shreds rather than let it be captured. By nightfall, fewer than 20 men rallied to a call for the 16th.
Ready. Whoa!
The 2nd Artillery Battery under James Hall finds itself doing much the same as the 16th Maine, buying time and trying to slow down the Confederate Army. The artillerymen wind up in desperate hand-to-hand combat against far superior numbers. In 25 minutes from the time we opened fire, a column of the enemy's infantry charged up a ravine on our right flank, within 60 yards of my right piece. When they commenced shooting down my horses and wounding my men, I ordered the right and center sections to open upon this column with canister and kept the left firing upon the enemy's artillery. This canister fire was very effective and broke the charge of the enemy. James Hall, Captain, commanding 2nd Maine Battery.
On the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, the 5th Maine Battery, under the command of Greenleaf T. Stevens, took position not 200 yards behind me on what's called Seminary Ridge. They were next to another battery, they were surrounded by infantry, and they were presented with an opportunity as Confederates furiously assaulted their position.
Prepare! Fire!
The Confederates attacked in what appeared to them to be waves. First, you have Confederates coming at them in one line. They repulsed them, but the 2nd Confederate line, North Carolinians, under the command of a guy named Scales, came swarming into their position. And with the Union line buckling on right and left, there was nothing they could do. Eventually, they commingled and intermixed with the battery next to them and conducted a furious retreat back through the crowded streets of Gettysburg.
Night falls on day 1 at Gettysburg, yet the two opposing armies are still not at full strength. Even so, the number of casualties has already been enormous. 26,000 men have been killed or wounded. Many thousands of soldiers are still making their way across the Pennsylvania landscape, determined to reach Gettysburg. Through the tense morning hours, the two forces take stock of enemy positions and plan their next moves.
There was a question of whether the Confederate forces wanted to reposition. Do we really want to have the Battle of Gettysburg? Can we take day 1 and say, well, never mind, let's move off to a better position? This was what James Longstreet was arguing with Robert E. Lee. And Lee finally put his foot down and, look, Jim, the enemy is there, and we're going to attack the enemy where the enemy is.
General Daniel Sickles' Corps is on the left side of the Union line. Sickles' Corps includes the 3rd, 4th, and 17th Maine Infantry Regiments and the 1st U.S. Sharpshooters.
Sickles has been in a position before where he felt that he was blind, or at least visually impaired. He could not see where the Confederate troops were, but he knew they were out there.
The 3rd Maine was incredibly involved. It was the 2nd day of the battle. They marched up the Emmitsburg Road with the 3rd Corps. When they arrived in the battlefield, Sickles quickly realized that he wanted to take advantage of the high ground below the Round Tops, which was contrary to orders. In order to do that, he needed some time. So in order to hold back the Confederate advance, he sent a small contingent of United States sharpshooters and 1 regiment of infantry, and that happened to be the 3rd Maine Regiment.
Moses Lakeman is commanding the 3rd Maine Infantry Regiment at Gettysburg. He's a meat cutter from Augusta, and he's almost revered by his men. They know him to be fair, they know him to be a leader, that he will not ask them to do anything that he will not do himself.
The 3rd Maine was sent 1 mile in advance of the Union line to a little area of wood called the Pitzer's Woods. In the Pitzer's Woods, the 3rd Maine fought right alongside the United States sharpshooters, mostly from Vermont, ironically, another New England connection, and fought against the entire advance of Longstreet's corps.
Well, the 3rd Maine goes out, and the snipers, being good at what they do, and they have a little bit more ammunition, they also have far greater accuracy. They take up, according to Lakeman in his after-action report, all the best positions, and they're able to be devastatingly effective. Their accuracy astounds the Confederate leadership. They think they're facing a force as large as their own, when it was really not even a tenth of what they had in the woods.
As they fought through there, they lost a few dozen men, quickly fighting back through heavy woods and then back over lots of open farmland. They lost even more.
The 4th Maine is ordered forward to a pile of boulders known locally as the Devil's Den. It is an unwittingly apt name for what will become a killing ground of terrible proportions.
They set up about on the perimeter. They're not in the boulders themselves, but they're next to it. And the fighting there is hellacious.
Colonel Elijah Walker was the commander of the 4th Maine Infantry here at Gettysburg, and he was walking his line when a bullet came in and struck him in the leg. Walker at this point was certainly hobbled by his injury. He yelled to his command, he told them to fix bayonets. Walker said that when he ordered them to fix bayonets, it was like one bayonet going into one gun. They all went on at the same time. And then Walker yelled, "By the right oblique, charge." And all of those Maine boys went charging up to the top of this hill up here, into the face of 4 Confederate regiments. And somehow Walker was able to make it to the top of the hill, and later on in the fighting, he had his sword taken from him, and he was pretty much immobilized, but 2 of his men actually fought, got his sword back, and Walker was able to retreat with the rest of the army.
The 17th Maine Infantry is ordered to defend the wheat field, an open ground bordered by a small rock wall on one side.
The 17th Maine becomes part of the unit that's sent to the gap between the Peach Orchard and Devil's Den. And the 17th Maine winds up at the wheat field. And the wheat field in July in Gettysburg, it's not up to your shoulders. It's not even up to your waist. It's more like up shin high.
We're standing in a wheat field at Gettysburg National Battlefield. Behind me is the Battery D of the 1st New York Light Artillery. To the south, about 300 yards, is a low stone wall next to the woods. That's where the 17th Maine was positioned on the afternoon of July the 2nd.
Carolinians and Georgians are on the other side of that rock wall. Over the course of the afternoon and into the early evening, the 17th Maine and the Confederates vie for control of the wheat field.
And so the stand they made is one of the most important ones. And their stone wall, which they'll defend, that becomes the center of action.
6 times the wheat field changes hands.
The 17th Maine at the stone wall at the south end of the wheat field is a critical delaying action and holding it until more troops can come here.
And the 17th Maine finally has to withdraw. After being out there for a while by themselves, they run out of ammunition at about the time they're running out of energy and they're running out of men. And they're told to retreat. Their retreat is covered by, again, our friends in the artillery. High up, and they're looking down and saying, okay, we see what's happening in the Peach Orchard. 3rd Maine is in trouble. Devil's Den, 4th Maine is in trouble. 17th Maine is in trouble.
The 20th Maine was among the later Union arrivals, reaching Gettysburg around noon on the 2nd day of battle. The 20th is ordered to move quickly to a place the locals call the Knob, what we know today as Little Round Top.
General Governor Warren from New York has seen that when Sickles moved forward, that left the Knob empty. The Knob is literally a knob, and if you could put artillery units up there, when we talk about an enfilading fire down the line, if you own the high ground, even of the Knob at 60 feet up in the air, you could have a devastating effect of firing down the Union line. So in the 20th Maine, which had to march about 8 miles that day, and understand that this is July, 2nd of July in Pennsylvania. It's warmer than 90 degrees. These guys are hot, they're tired. Union command says, get to General Governor Warren from New York. You're going to go down to the far left of the Union line and you're going to hold it at all costs. And now they're being told, oh, by the way, you're the anchor. You can't leave. So they take up position, and in the late afternoon, the Texans and the Alabamans, that Longstreet is in command, they're coming up and they make repeated advances up Little Round Top. The 20th Maine runs out of ammunition.
Late in the afternoon, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain orders a daring bayonet charge down the slope by the 20th. The counterattack is risky, but successfully halts the rebel advance.
I understand this is July 2nd, 1863. He's only been in the Army since August of 1862. Hasn't even been in a year. And now he's ordering a bayonet charge with guys with empty muskets down Little Round Top, down the knob. And it's such an audacious move against an exhausted opponent that they wind up holding Little Round Top and holding the day at the Union left.
Rewarded for saving the Union left, the 20th is sent to a reserve position that the Union command expects will be idle on day 3, the center of the Union line.
After the 5th Maine Battery retreated back through town, they weren't exactly sure where to go. They knew that the Union Army was gathering on Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. And soon, an officer came riding up, pointing to those brass guns over there. Get those up to yonder hill. Yonder hill was not Culp's Hill or Cemetery Hill, but rather a knoll between the two, now known as Stevens Knoll, named after the commander of the 5th Maine Battery. That is where they would take position. They were there on the evening of July 1st, and on July 2nd, 1863, not a whole lot happened until twilight, when again North Carolinians come streaming out right toward their position and did something that artillerymen don't often see. In the course of their attack, they had to move to the right. In other words, they had to wheel, and in doing so, presented a perfect target for Stevens Battery. Stevens Battery, now under the command of Edward Whittier, and the Union opened up with absolutely deadly effect upon the Confederates. It slowed the Confederates down, although the Southerners continued to push on toward East Cemetery Hill. But Stevens Battery had done their job. They had slowed the Confederates down, they had thinned their ranks, and the Southerners fell back before long.
The devastating and deadly skill of the 5th Maine slowed and stopped the rebel attempt to gain the high ground. When the fatigued soldiers finally stopped fighting, not much had been settled. Both armies ended the day, more or less, where they had begun. By midnight on July 2nd, the gunfire has finally stopped, and an eerie, uneasy silence blankets the battlefield. The grim tally for day 2, another 9,000 casualties. The Union forces gather themselves and redeploy along a defensive position atop Cemetery Ridge. Again, the two armies eye one another.
Day 3 at Gettysburg finds many of the main units, particularly those under General Sickles' Corps who have been exhausted in day 2. They're going to be held mostly in a reserve position on day 3, regardless of what happens. Other units that have been less tested, shall we say, are going to be brought forward, and whether we're from Michigan and New York or Pennsylvania and New Jersey, any of the other Union states, those guys are going to be filling in. And a lot of the main troops are scattered about. Hall's Battery is in a backup position. Stevens Battery is in a backup position. They're still functional, but they are not going to be carrying the battle much as they were on days 1 and 2.
The Union's defensive position above the town is stronger, in essence daring the rebels to attack. Confederate General Robert E. Lee chooses to do just that, mobilizing 12,000 infantrymen and sending them directly at the center of the Union line. Before they begin their mile-long march, under Lee's orders, the rebel artillery begins a relentless bombardment of Cemetery Ridge that lasts almost 2 full hours, with Union artillery answering. It remains the greatest and most sustained artillery barrage on American soil in the country's history.
And as fate would have it, on July 3rd, 1863, the Southerners would launch their most substantial effort that day against the Union center, right where the 19th Maine was. The 19th Maine hit them on the way with musketry fire, and when the Southerners broke through, the 19th was there to help repel the attack. The fighting on July 3rd is varied and in several different spots, but because of the fame of the Maine attack, now known as Pickett's Charge, we really don't talk about these other actions. There's cavalry fighting south of town. There's a huge cavalry fight east of town on what we call East Cavalry Field.
Maine's 1st Cavalry Regiment waits anxiously in reserve, wondering if and when they will be called to action.
They're itching to get into the fight. They want to be part of this.
30 minutes into the purest cavalry battle of the entire war, the 1st Maine is called forward to repel Confederate cavalry of Jeb Stuart.
If you can knock Jeb Stuart back, and you're looking at 3,000 cavalrymen, if you can knock them back, you have accomplished something.
More than 7,000 cavalrymen engage in the battle.
They really turned the tide. It was going to happen anyway. But when they arrive and they start firing, the day is over for Jeb Stuart.
The 1st Maine Cavalry and the rest of the Union horse soldiers are successful in frustrating Stuart's advance. Pickett's Virginia infantry is left to fend for themselves against the middle of the Union line on Cemetery Ridge. The unimaginable total for 3 days of brutal fighting at Gettysburg was more than 44,000 men, nearly 1/3 of the two armies. Did the Civil War end at Gettysburg? No, not by a long shot. But Gettysburg marked the beginning of the end. And the 15 regiments and batteries from Maine, who fought so fearlessly and so proudly for the Union, played an undeniably critical role in that outcome.
Maine contributed mightily on all 3 days of the battle, performing valiantly. Their deeds are marked, literally etched in stone, on the battlefield of Gettysburg.
The actual fighting may have ended shortly after the surrender at Appomattox, but many of the issues that so tragically inflamed and divided the American public then, sadly, remain with us today.
It's not over. It hasn't been over. It won't be over. The memory will last.